Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Happy Halloween to you and yours. I hope everyone in your community and your family are having a good time tonight as you play a little bit of pretend out there. Be safe and enjoy the weather. Hopefully it is enjoyable where you are. As always, we encourage you guys to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily at our Alaska Weather Information line. 1-800-472-0391 is how you find that. And weather.gov/Alaska, of course, on the website, mobile.weather.gov if you're still walking around with your trick-or-treaters. And check that on your phone or your mobile device. Pretty easy on low bandwidth solutions there. That's a good way to do it. If you can't find what you're looking for, david.snyder@noaa.gov, and send me a picture of your costumes and your kiddos as well. It'll be a fun time. As we get into our weather, here's a look at Bethel earlier this afternoon. A lot of clouds. You can see one of the planes taking off about midday. As we were looking to our south and west, we were watching these clouds moving in above colder air, and the concern was that there could be some freezing rain out there as that system was moving in from the south. And so right now you're seeing that the dry and cold air is winning in Bethel as of mid-afternoon, but that could certainly change as we head into the evening hours, and thus a winter weather advisory was issued by the National Weather Service office folks here in Anchorage. That advisory will extend all the way up the valley there toward Antioch and Sleet Mute, and again, watching for the potential of some light freezing rain there. It doesn't look like it's going to be a very large or impressive event, but enough that could make some surfaces slick out there, so we want you to be careful and be alerted that that potential is there. That'll go through tonight. And as we look out toward the east, the White Pass area, the Klondike Highway, looking for the potential of snow, several inches of snow, generally above 2,500 feet, I believe. About 4 inches may fall tonight and into tomorrow, so a winter weather advisory has been posted there for travelers going up and down. Always a good idea this time of the year to make sure that your supplies are in the trunk of your car. Things like maybe some extra blankets, or if you've got one of those really cool battery chargers, that's good in case you get stuck. And some chains there. If you're not using studded snow tires, it's always a good idea to have the chains in the back of the car. And, you know, a couple, maybe a few bags or cans of rations there, something that tide you over until help arrives and maybe can help pull you out of the ditch should something happen. Always a good idea to be prepared. So as you look up to the north, the other issue that we have tonight is a blizzard warning for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Remember, we've had a pretty powerful storm working across the Chukchi Sea and now into the Beaufort, and pretty strong westerly winds are wrapping around here. And as we expect to see on the satellite picture, with that, some stronger winds there have brought visibility down across parts of the coast, including areas around Kaktovik. I haven't seen that at the airport as at this point, but in the general vicinity, that is happening, so a blizzard warning has been posted there. Conditions should improve again late tonight and early tomorrow morning. Here's a look out at Prudhoe Bay. This is the south camera, and you can see conditions in Prudhoe are looking pretty good. You can actually see the glow of the sun there off to the south. Not a whole lot of snow blowing or falling, so no major issues there for Prudhoe. The blizzard warnings for areas just a little bit further east out toward Kaktovik there and Point Thompson. So good news there, not a whole lot going on there in Prudhoe, just cold and kind of breezy, I believe. For your Halloween Eve, as we look at a low pressure system there across the North Pacific, we continue to see that big channel of moisture working its way northward. That moisture pump has helped with high pressure here across southern parts of southeast and Haida Gwaii in the eastern Pacific, and low pressure out here in the west, and all that combines to just sweep all that moisture and push it northward and running right into the Alaska range, the Boundary Range, and northern parts of southeast. As that process repeats, it's wringing out the moisture around south central. Plenty of rain around the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, Kodiak Island, all the way down to southwest. But remember, I said there's this wedge of colder air, colder, drier air sitting right about here, and we saw that with the picture in Bethel. As that moisture is working up and over that, we get a potential for what we call overrunning. So that warm and wet air comes up over the colder and drier air, and as that precipitation falls out of the cloud and into that colder and drier air, those raindrops here that were previously liquid could freeze on contact with cold surfaces down below. That's freezing rain. And again, the threat for some light amounts of freezing rain here around the Kuskokwim Delta and into the lower Kuskokwim Valley itself, or Sleet Mute up toward Antioch, that potential's there. So that's what we wanted to tell people about tonight. And again, the moisture moving up the Klondike Highway there presents a possibility for some accumulating snow for travelers. But north of the Alaska Range, a considerable amount of drier air. Looks like we're going to have smooth sailing as far as visibility and ceilings go tomorrow. If you're planning to fly around the Yukon Valley and generally north to the Brooks Range, you really should be in pretty good shape there. It doesn't look like there's a big threat for turbulence. Doesn't look like there's a big threat for visibility or ceiling restrictions. We'll show you those maps here in just a few minutes. As we move even further north across the Brooks Range, then we get back into this area of low pressure north of AKwx. That's the one that's causing the blizzard concerns there for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. And you can see a lot of the cloud cover working right over the Point Thompson area. Stronger westerly winds there, 30, 35 miles per hour at least. So visibility could be down. It may not be down for everybody all the time, but it does look like there's a potential for at least some widespread issues there for visibility and certainly some blowing snow. So be careful if you're in that area and heed the warnings as usual. Across the Bering Strait, a lot of moisture there working in from the north, but that's mostly cold air that we're seeing on the satellite picture. High pressure is pushing in some more stable air across the region. Got a ridge stretching all the way across the Yukon Valley and just south of the Brooks Range. There's our snow in the north. And our major weather system really is here across the south and west, pumping in that moisture right along the triple point where we have an occlusion, cold air, and the warm air all meeting up together. And the purple line again, as we like to say, it's kind of where all the air is already starting to mix up. We still have a boundary here of low pressure and a wind shift and a humidity shift. So we draw the front in, but everything here is not well mixed. Everything behind that purple line is kind of getting mixed up. So we tend to see this go away fairly quickly once we reach the stage. And as this weather system is creeping eastward, that's exactly what's going to happen. Rain is spreading into the north. We'll start to see some snow up around White Pass. Rain is spreading northward toward the Alaska Range, coming through Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, southwest, all the way down the Aleutians. And as we get into tonight, again, we're watching for that potential for some freezing rain. And that's what the squiggy tilde and dot mean there. That's the weather symbol for freezing rain. So not the kind of thing you want to see on the map. It'd be much better if it was just rain and snow, but in this case it does look like there's a potential for at least some light amounts of freezing rain. The bulk of the moisture, though, here's the good news. A lot of that's going to stay south of the Aleutian Range, over Kodiak, over South Central, over Prince William Sound, and a lot of that probably is not going to get up into Southwest or the Yukon Valley. As that mixed air mass works further and further inland there, it's going to weaken substantially tonight and into early tomorrow morning. You can see, though, that we are blowing in some more rain into parts of southeast. Higher trends looking at snowfall there. But remember how I said the flying weather across the interior looked pretty good? This is why. All that moisture is still well to the south. The other system's pulling that moisture up across the north slope, and high pressure has really dried out a large chunk of interior Alaska, generally north of the Yukon Valley. So chances are you may see some fair weather clouds, but it looks like once the sun comes up, things should be pretty good if you need to move around across the interior for tonight and into tomorrow. Out across southwest, looks like we'll see high pressure holding around the Gulf of Anadyr and also across western parts of Canada, around British Columbia. That will chip away at some of the moisture working its way eastward, but it also holds this weather pattern kind of in place for Friday. So periods of rain around Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island, a very slim margin there for some freezing rain across southwest, but it does look like most of the areas, especially the surrounding highlands, will be looking at areas of snow and probably areas of light rain across southeast. You'll also notice another surge of moisture coming in from the south across the southern Gulf. That's the next warm front that's going to lift northward quickly and kind of reinforce some of the rain across the Gulf. Up north, you see our weather front there just offshore of the Beaufort Seacoast, and of course AKwx still watching the snow there. The wind should subside slowly for early tomorrow morning and into Friday. Probably not lingering under blizzard conditions, but we'll have to see if that stalls out anymore. That may linger. Snow showers there across the Chukchi coast, but really quiet weather the further west you go. As we get into Saturday, still watching for areas of light snow across the Beaufort Seacoast and the Chukchi for that matter. High pressure is trying to move in and kind of slow down the winds just a little bit more. You can see snow showers across the Chugach and areas around Cordova up toward Valdez. Cordova is probably looking at a little bit more of a rain-snow mix than anything else. And areas around southeast also looking at hit-and-miss precipitation. Most of the lowlands will be dealing with areas of light rainfall. Showers expected from Kodiak Island all the way down the Alaska Peninsula. And then our high-pressure ridge is still in place across the central and eastern Bering all the way into the interior. So a really large area of real estate all the way from southwest up the west coast, Seward, Kotzebue, Kivalina even. Probably looking at a generally clear sky for your Saturday. It looks pretty good. But it will be cold because all of this air that's come in with that crystal clearness is coming out of the north, and that is all going to be right over you. So watch for temperatures to drop off. In fact, let's take a look at temperatures as we go into tomorrow morning or tonight. Lower 40s to about mid-40s for southeast, overnight lows there. About 40 around Prince William Sound, upper 30s to close to 40 degrees around the Cook Inlet region, 44 around Kodiak. And then you get up to Fairbanks in the middle Tanana Valley. Temps will be in the teens there, 5 below for Arctic Village, Teens and 20s for the North Slope. Nome, you're looking at 22. 20s for most of the Yukon Delta. As you get into the Bristol Bay region, lower to mid 40s there. Sandpoint 47, 35 in St. George and St. Paul. High temperatures on Friday. Cold stuff. Arctic Village, 2 degrees, 14 in Fort Yukon. 20s, lower 30s for the middle Tanana Valley and around Fairbanks there. And then mid 40s once you get south of the Alaska Range. 50 in fact around King Salmon. 40s and 50s for southeast. 34 around Gamble and Savunga. Mid 40s for the Aleutians. 43 in St. Paul. Overnight lows Saturday morning, back to 34 in St. Paul, close to 40 for most of the Aleutians, lower 40s for the Alaska Peninsula, and starting to get colder around the Bristol Bay region. You'll notice once you get toward Bethel, Antioch, Sleetmute, you're looking at temperatures in the 20s. McGrath only 24, 14 in Tanana, lower to mid 20s for the interior, including Fairbanks. The Cook Inlet region, including Anchorage, down toward Homer, Seward, you're looking at temps in the 30s there, 40 or so around Kodiak, and lower to mid 40s for southeast Juneau, about 43. And then Saturday afternoon, not a big warm up at all. Remember that big dry area of high pressure that moved in? That's what it's doing. Temperatures there in the lower to mid teens, 7 in Arctic Village, 15 for Ambler. Bettle's only 11. Lower to mid 20s for many in the Beaufort Seacoast, lower 30s for the Chukchi Coast, 32 in Shishmaref, 28 in Nome, 34 for Gamble and Savunga. Bethel down to 31 degrees and 36 in McCormick, with 50 in Kodiak and areas around King Cove, False Pass, and Pilot Point. Now as we look ahead into the next several days, it gets warmer in the west.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to your aviation weather now. IFR concerns will linger across southeastern Alaska with a weak area of low pressure here across the Gulf. The main forcing will continue to be out across south and west where most of our moisture is, and it'll hover around the southwestern part of the state as we go through Friday morning and gradually thin out as it spreads eastward. But do watch for IFR concerns around the Alaska Range, Prince William Sound, and all along the Alaska Peninsula to the central and eastern Aleutians. Up around the Bering Strait and just south through St. Lawrence Island down to St. Matthew, IFR will linger there. Marginal conditions really through most of the North Slope and the Arctic coast, and really through the areas through the Yukon Valley, but generally to the south and into the Alaska Range. You'll find more breaks there across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. And as we get into Friday afternoon, that opens up a little bit more. You'll notice that stretching from the Yukon Valley northward all the way out toward Nome and Norton Sound. Things look to be VFR. Out to the west and south, widespread marginal conditions through most of the chain, with IFR lingering around the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula and then breaking up a little bit as it moves into Bristol Bay, but returning there as we get into the Alaska Range, all the way up into the upper Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley, and then fairly thick across the central and eastern Gulf, with marginal conditions for most of the outer coast and the inside passage of southeast for tomorrow afternoon. For Saturday morning, watch for IFR to return again for the inside and the outer coast of southeast. That'll stretch all the way back toward Yakutat and just about to Cordova. IFR will linger across the Kenai Mountains and the Chugach, as well as the Talkeetnas, all the way through Lake Iliamna and southwest. Hit and miss across the Alaska Peninsula and then just south of the central Aleutians, with IFR also finding its way into the north and western Bering, approaching St. Matthew. Marginal conditions linger across the North Slope. A few holes there just east of Utqiagvik and Atkasuk. And then from about Nome all the way down to Amonik and eastward, you'll find widespread VFR. That should improve and expand as we get into Saturday afternoon. Most of the central and southern Bering will be VFR, including St. Paul and St. George. IFR lingers across the southern parts of southeast and the central Gulf, with areas of IFR from the Kenai Mountains into the eastern Chugach and just north of McCarthy as we get into the afternoon. Here's your pass conditions now. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions through most of the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will lean over toward IFR as we go. Rainy Pass expected to see IFR conditions there. Windy Pass also looking at instrument flight rule as we go through your day on Friday. For Isabel Pass, IFR is expected there. Mentasta Pass, marginal concerns will linger. Tanita Pass, we expect to see IFR throughout the day. Portage Pass also expected to be down through most of your Friday, and Chilkoot and White Pass may see some minor improvements as we go, looking at IFR leaning over toward marginal conditions as we go throughout your day. Freezing levels show that warm air is really massed across the central and eastern Gulf there. Levels anywhere from 2 to 4, maybe 6,000 feet in the north, and then 8 to 10,000 feet across the central and southern parts of the Panhandle. You'll notice it's spread out a little bit more across southwest, and the concern we're watching, of course, is this overrunning of the warmer air over the layer of the cold surface air. If the surface line were a little bit further south and west, it would be a really good setup for a bad weather situation for freezing rain or maybe some sleet there. So something we're keeping tabs on. That's exactly what's happening today in parts of Southwest, and the reason why winter weather advisory was issued. Icing potential generally up high, about 5 to 6, maybe 7,000 feet across the eastern interior and southwest, all the way out across the central and eastern chain as well. Generally 6 to 7,000 feet and above to the west and southwest, anywhere from 2 to about 5,000 feet around the Alcan border and southward, 6,000 feet around south central. No discernible large impact expected across southeast at this point for any icing potential there. The jet stream has the Arctic jet blasting in across the Chukchi around 60 knots there from the west, but the main controlling feature here is the trough across the Bering and into the North Pacific, anywhere from 95 to 120 knots, with high pressure across the central and eastern Gulf there, and a little bit of a stronger westerly flow moving across the northern Gulf at 75 knots. You can see that down below at 9,000 feet. That south and westerly wind, 40 to 50 knots there. Light westerlies coming through the interior, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots. Low pressure sitting off of Cape Newenham with about 5 to 20 knots there around the region. And then high pressure across the western Bering. Winds are fairly light there, but the main impact again across the Bristol Bay region and the Alaska Peninsula has winds coming in more from a north and easterly direction across the central Bering, and stronger southerlies coming across the western Gulf, 10 to 20 knots, with high pressure sitting south of Haida Gwaii, and west and southwesterlies across the interior. No really strong winds right now across most of the mainland. We will be watching for some thumps and bumps across the central and southern parts of southeast, primarily below 4,000 feet. Kind of a widespread, considerable moderate region here, generally south of the capital city to Sitka and all the way down toward the Dixon entrance. And then over Kodiak Island, Lake Iliamna, back to about Pilot Point, I believe, below about 4,000 feet.
Identified flying objects.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Alberry, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Have you ever seen a mysterious light in the sky, something that makes you pause, makes you wonder?
Makes you think an alien invasion is coming?
James and I get a lot of calls from stargazers out there who see mysterious lights in the sky.
Sometimes they're blinking, sometimes they're fast-moving and bright, and other times they slowly creep from one side of the sky to the other.
Unfortunately, these UFOs are not from aliens. I've been watching and waiting for them for years, but so far nothing. Aliens never call. They never write back.
It's okay, Dean. Don't take it personally. If these mysterious lights aren't aliens, what are they?
We're going to share our tips for solving the mystery and turn these UFOs into identified flying objects. Let's show you. Okay, we have our sky set for any night this week facing southwest, just after sunset. We're looking for extraterrestrial objects, and there is one of the most commonly seen UFOs just above the horizon. It is suspiciously bright.
It may not move across the sky in an alien way, but its brightness is so dazzling that people wonder about it all the time. It is actually the planet Venus, and when people see it for the first time, they're startled.
Often, if I'm driving in a car and I see it, I think, whoa, what is that?
And especially when you drive on a curvy road, Venus can give the impression that it is following you. But we want everyone to keep your eyes on the road and let your passengers watch Venus.
Now, if you live in a city, you'll probably see a lot of blinking lights in the sky, tops of buildings, radio towers, and more.
But if you see a blinking light that is moving at a steady rate, it's probably just a plane. Sometimes when planes are flying right at you, they can give the impression of a UFO. But keep watching, and when they go past you, you'll see the telltale blinking red and blue lights.
Now, planes might move slowly across the sky, but what if you're outside and you see a quick flash? Out of the corner of your eye, or streaking quickly across the sky, you see this.
Whoa! If it moves super fast and only lasts a second or two, that's a meteor, or what most people call a shooting star. Meteors are tiny pieces of ice, rock, and dust that fall from space into our atmosphere.
The brighter ones can even turn green in color, break up into pieces, and even leave visible smoke trails behind. Look, James, make a wish.
Oh, so cool.
But what if you see a slow-moving, non-blinking light steadily crossing the night sky? What the heck is that?
Most likely it's a satellite. There are thousands of these man-made objects circling the Earth.
One of the brightest satellites is the International Space Station, or ISS. The ISS is 239 feet wide, 356 feet long, and 66 feet tall, so it can often look brighter than the brightest stars in the sky. 6 crew members can live there at a time, so if you see the ISS going overhead, be sure to wave.
The reason why you can see the ISS and other satellites is that while you're in the dark, the sun is still shining on them. They are about 200 to 300 miles up, and so it's still daytime there. The sunlight reflects off them and lets you see them just after sunset or right before sunrise.
You can use apps like Satellite Tracker and Sputnik to see when bright satellites will fly overhead, and I really like the website heavens-above.com to tell me when and where to look for them. Well, I'm always looking for UFOs to fly over my town, but they always end up being identifiable.
Whether you see dazzling Venus after sunset, blinking planes, streaking meteors, or steadily moving satellites, these objects can make your stargazing experience even better.
And who knows, maybe you'll see an alien someday.
Yeah, now, that would be something. Good luck with that wild alien chase, Dehne. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with your marine weather update now. We're still seeing some very small concentrations of thin ice across coastal areas, generally east from Utqiagvik, along some of the bays and the barrier islands, all the way out toward Kaktovik. You can see some lower concentration ice there around Kaktovik, and then along the border of the thicker pack ice that's remained there all summer long. Some of that is creeping east, or westward, I should say, as well. Also looking at some newer ice up in the upper end of Kotzebue Sound around some of the bays again, just south and east of Kotzebue, and certainly some new ice along the Russian coastline. More information at any time at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at the weather forecast now for southeast. You're looking at southerlies working through the inside passage, 15 to 25 knots, gust to 35 around Stevens Passage. It will be blustery as the front's passing through. 3 to 5 foot seas on the inside. You're looking at 9 to 10 foot seas on the outside with a general westerly flow or onshore push from about 15 to 25 knots. As we get into your Saturday, southerlies continue on the inside, though they diminish greatly. 10 knots and 2 foot seas. There may be 3 foot seas down around the Clarence Strait. North and westerly winds coming down the outer coast, 10 to 15. You're looking at 7 foot seas on the outside on Saturday. For south central, easterlies blowing in across Prince William Sound at 15 knots with 2 foot seas, 8 to 9 foot seas across the outer coast and the northern Gulf there, 15 to 25 knots coming in. Southeasterlies for the western Barrens. More of a northeasterly flow coming down Cook Inlet, 10 to 20 knots, expecting 3 to 4 foot seas on Friday. Diminishing again from the north with 10 knot winds in most areas. Across Cook Inlet, 2 to 3 foot seas, 6 foot seas across the north and western Gulf, 2 foot seas inside of Prince William Sound, and northerlies outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance in the northern Gulf, 10 knots and 7 foot seas there on Saturday. For Bristol Bay, southerlies there, 15 knots, 3 foot seas, 5 foot seas down the Alaska Peninsula coastline. South and westerlies coming up the northern Gulf, 20 to 25. You're looking at 9 to 12 foot seas there from AKwx all the way out toward Falls Pass. Southerlies inside of Shelikof Strait, a 20 knot wind gets you 4 foot seas on Friday. Wind should diminish and become northeasterly in all areas as we get into Saturday. East winds probably about 10 to 15 knots. So there from Bristol Bay all the way down the Alaska Peninsula coastline. 1 to 4 foot seas, very small seas in fact around Bristol Bay. And then northeasterlies on either side of Kodiak Island, 10 knots there with 2 to 7 foot seas, and 15 to 20 knot winds coming down the Alaska Peninsula. 15 to 20 knots gets you about 4 to 5 foot seas as we go into Saturday. For the Aleutians, northerlies should be fairly light. Expect about 15 to 20 knots there for most of the area, 8 to 9 foot seas for the central and eastern chain, and about 7 to 8 foot seas out in the west, 15 to 20 coming in out of the north. You're still looking at a little bit of a southwesterly flow between Nikolsky and Unalaska and eastward, all feeding into the low pressure system out there across the Gulf. Look for about 6 to 7 foot seas across the Pacific coastal waters and 4 to 6 foot seas as we get into Saturday. 7-foot seas across the Bering, anywhere from about 15 to 20 knots or so. And you're going to see the winds come up a little bit sharply between Kiska and Shemya on Saturday, all feeding into the next weather front that's moving in, a warm front moving up out of the North Pacific, mainly closer to the Russian waters. As we get into Friday across the west coast, north and easterlies coming out of Norton Sound across St. Lawrence Island and Nunivak Island, looking at about 20 to 30 knots there. And 4 to 8 foot seas for the most part. A little bit of a stronger wind and higher seas around St. Paul and St. George. You may see 10-foot seas there on Friday. That diminishes on Saturday, still looking at a northeasterly flow coming off the YK Delta. And out of Norton Sound, a north and easterly wind gets you about 20 knots and 4-foot seas there. 4 to 5-foot seas as you head down around Macoriac and St. Paul, St. George. That comes up to about 6-foot seas on Saturday. For the north slope, the windiest spot's really going to be just offshore of Kaktovik. Again, blizzard warnings are in effect there tonight. Westerlies coming across the Arctic coast, 15 to 30. North and westerlies coming into the Chukchi coast and Kotzebue Sound, 3 to 4-foot seas expected tomorrow. And that diminishes from Cape Lisburne southward, but still blustery there from Point Lay all the way up toward Ukqiavik and Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, anywhere from 15 to 20 knots, and expecting 3 to about 4-foot seas, 5-foot seas in fact, west of Wainwright and Point Lay. That's your marine weather. Let's recap the rest of the weather picture tonight. Snow is going to fall around the Klondike Highway and the Taya Inlet regions there. Generally above 2,500 feet, you can expect up to 4 inches of snow if you're traveling the roadway. Be prepared. Have equipment and necessarily emergency supplies in your trunk in case you are traveling tonight. Do expect it to snow. Rain for southeast. Potential for some light freezing rain around the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, primarily from Bethel southward and then up toward Aniak and Sleepmute. Only light amounts again, not expecting a whole lot of ice, but the freezing rain potential is there. South of that, all rain across the southwest into the chain and across south central. Fronts working northward, and a blizzard warning for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast as we head into tonight and tomorrow. That should improve as we head into Saturday. Snow continues to fall across higher terrain with rain down below.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.